Okay, guys, welcome back to Leave It to Deever. This little revival. I think we're a few episodes in now. We're 34, 35. Today I've got the one and only Shea Swenson. We've known each other now for a year or two.
About a year and a half.
When did we go to Buffalo?
Maybe it was only a year.
Bronze Buffalo?
Year and a half, probably.
Yeah, we met each other through a couple mutual friends, and we went up to this Bronze Buffalo event over there in Idaho, and that was beautiful. And we have Levi knew you before that though.
Yep. We went to some events, some of the networking events, some of the private equity groups and real estate groups, and we connected. I think we played poker one night.
Yeah.
And we connected.
And he had told me about you, and then we kind of got connected. How did you? I mean, let's just jump right into. I always like to talk the business end of things first, but talk Stonebriar and your background.
Yeah. So I weirdly enough started in the door after my mission. Started in the door-to-door space. Actually, it was the e-commerce space first for about a year, then door-to-door, went to Vivint for a year, then got into solar and helped build Brio Energy, which is not in business anymore, left to a group called Summit. Yep. They're actually back east doing really, really well. Down Ma runs that, and they're doing really well. But I was about a year with them, like the third employee. And I just got to the end of like, okay, I kind of was a VP of sales, and I'm like, I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I literally, like, what the day it changed my life is my old mission companion's brothers owned a wealth management firm in Greenville, South Carolina. I was on a trip to Charleston to do permits for solar. It was miserable to do solar permits in Charleston. And I was just flying there, and he saw on Instagram or something that I was there, and he called me and just said, hey, man, I think you need to go buy a suit and go spend the day with my brothers. And so I just kind of skipped work and drove up there, and they just picked the perfect day to have me there. They obviously didn't plan it because it was last minute, but they closed like massive deals, $300,000-$400,000 revenue deals to the business that day. And then they were on the news that night.
Yeah.
And so I'm following these two guys in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, driving Maseratis. They're just like on billboards. And I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
And he closes a deal, and he's like, we just made $200,000. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what do you, like, no. Like in a solar, a big deal, maybe $50,000, like $30,000, $20,000, but most of them are $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. And so I'm like, what is this world? Like, and I want it. And they're obviously working with high net worth people. And so I took a chance. They were opening up their new offices in Orlando, and I kind of took a chance. Went from making like $200,000 to $35,000, and with some upside, right?
Yeah.
Hey, if you do well, and pretty much I just helped them build their companies down there and their offices. And about a year in, I just realized the money was me, going and getting licensed and actually making a career of it. So became a wealth advisor. And
So one thing, even going backwards a little bit, I want to ask, at that time you were doing the solar and you were doing well, and you get into the wealth management. Were you married yet?
no.
So that's actually really important. Is when I got into performance windows, when I got into selling windows, I was already married, I had a kid. I didn't have to think on a Wednesday like,
Yep.
I don't know if I have it in me today. I always, I don't know if envy is the right word, but I admire the guys that can do it with no wife, no kids. What was driving you at that point because door-to-door grind sucks.
Yes.
And the money's great, but what was driving you at that point to have your eye? Do you come from money? What was your?
No, I think that's a good place to start. So I grew up in a unique situation. My mom, alcoholic, drug addict, and so by the time I was 8, she lost custody of me and my half siblings. And being that there were half siblings, I got sent to live with my grandparents. We were living in Florida to Blanding, Utah. So that's why I ended up in Utah. They ended up in Texas, and then back and forth. And so I was thrown at 8 years old and kind of getting raised by 70-year-old people.
Yeah.
And that was where, even though I had a good life and I had a good, they were great in amazing ways, I was pretty much raised by myself, and I was very independent. So I built a lot of skills in just, I feel like, in more vulnerable is like I knew I didn't really have my parents around. So I'd actually like be able to get connected with my friends' parents. Like I was always up in the kitchen talking to the parents.
Yeah.
And I think it was just natural for me to be like, hey, I got to learn from them. Like I got to kind of squeeze, and most of my friends didn't really appreciate their parents.
Yeah.
So I think I appreciated more than they did. And so, but then led me on a mission, and outside the religious stuff, Larry Gelwicks was my mission president. Larry Gelwicks had the Forever Strong movie, Highland Rugby, Rugby Hall of Fame, and just one of the best leaders in the world. And he gave me this vision in my life for the first time of like, hey, yeah, it's okay. It doesn't matter where you come from. You can grind. Like you can hustle, you can grind. And so I think I had this expectation that he put in me that I didn't want to let him down because he thought of me up here. And so I think if I wouldn't have had that, I probably would have bailed out of door-to-door pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I think that gave me a vision.
It's funny you say that because in the last of three, you're number 3 in the last 3 podcasts. The first one was also raised in that scenario where his mom was struggling with a lot of stuff and in and out of jail most of his young life. And it's interesting because, I do a lot of stuff with some of these UFC guys, and usually they end up fighting, not really in high-powered business. And, when you start making this money doing solar and doing other door-to-door stuff, you hadn't been given an education on how to spend your money. Did you start just blasting all over, or how'd you learn to?
No, I did. I think so. Some of it was because door-to-door is a grind. So when I was with Brio, I opened up their San Antonio office, and I was literally by myself out there. Like they put me in a place, but I was knocking doors, training guys to knock doors, and then running the office. And then we had closers that would come in and close the leads in solar. So I was kind of doing a bunch of different things. And like my weekends, man, I'd go and buy Jordans and I'd go and buy. And that was my therapy. Yeah. Like I spent because I was just exhausted that I needed some dopamine. Good thing there wasn't like a casino close because there wasn't there. But that was like no, I didn't have good financial management. I think that's honestly one of the hardest things about door-to-door, if you can get good at it, is it's not a great place to learn financial skills. Like I remember when I was at Vivint my first year, I was with the roommate there, and he came home one day and he had a new set of golf clubs like in the middle of the summer. I'm like, what's up? He's like, dude, it's only one sale. Yeah. Right? And so then we started to like think of things as one sale. Like it wasn't money anymore. He's like, oh, that's no big deal. It's just one sale. Yep. And then by the end of it, like at the end of the year, you're like, you don't have any more sales. All the money's gone. And I think that obviously there's incredible skills, but being able to turn that. So I think going back to that, my childhood taught me, my grandparents' humble beginnings, we didn't have a whole lot, but living in Blanding, you didn't need a lot. Yeah. But the benefit of that is I've never had the itch to need money. Yeah. But that doesn't mean I was good at managing it. So I didn't feel the need to have the super nice car. I didn't feel the need to have all that, but I still wasn't good at actually investing, managing, in any of it, in door-to-door. But I did have this confidence that it doesn't matter because I can go make more.
Yeah, and that's always, I'm obviously a sales guy, and it's never been about saving money. It's been about going and making more,
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough. Now you're a financial advisor. When you're talking to guys, especially high net worth individuals, I'm sure a lot of guys think like that. You don't catch too many guys who are saving their money. How do you break them out of that mentality?
It's helping them. It's taking risk off the table, right? Like there's certain things in your life that you can take risk off the table. Like one of the ones is simple, and I think me and you talked about this, but like there's a lot of door-to-door kids right now. There's a lot of high-end executives in their 30s that are making $500,000 a year, maybe $1 million a year, and they still don't have life insurance. So I'm like, that's a simple one. For $1 million life insurance, it costs you $30 for 30 years, right? Just like get the life insurance. Yeah. But then it comes time as you get older, it's just putting away. I do believe that a young professional should continue to double down on themselves and reinvest in their own skills. But if you are not going to continue to reinvest in your own skills, then you have to find an investment plan. Like you have to. And so because at any point it's gone. Yeah. And so I think it does depend on the person. To give you kind of a guy came in, he inherited $300,000, 35 years old, making $200,000 a year. And he said, hey, how should I invest this money? And my first question was to him, and I think he was surprised. I think he thought being an advisor, like he's just going to take his money and invest it. And I said, are you at your cap in your career? Like you making 170, could you make 300? Like, are you capped at 170? He's like, no, there's guys making 300. So I just said, well, what's stopping you from making 300? Yeah. And he said, skills. And I said, okay, so the first thing you should do with that 300,000 is invest in yourself. Get the skills. Get a coach, get something. Get the skills, because if you can make 300, that's $130,000 more a year times 25 years is a lot more money than you're going to make in the stock market. Right. That being said, if he was a school teacher making $90,000 a year, loves his job, that's what he wants to do, he coaches football, then that $300,000 needs to be invested very differently. Yeah. It needs to be something where it can create passive income, whether that's a business, whether that's real estate, whether that's some dividends, something because he's not going to be able to build wealth in his profession, so he's got to build it somewhere else. So I think it's helping people see that do they want to continue to do this forever? And once they have that window, because if they're looking just in the next 2 to 5 years, they're just going to say, I'll just keep making money.
Yeah.
But when you can help see their vision of, hey, what about in 15 years? Do you want to keep doing what you're doing? Because you're going to have to keep grinding this way. And so you either got to develop skills or you got to build a portfolio that can pay you, which is a lot harder said than done in a lot of ways. So, but it just, man, Utah's a tricky one because we have the best sales talent probably in the world. But we have very low financial literacy.
Yeah.
Like truly, we don't fully understand.
Also, it's the scam capital of the world.
Scam capital of the world.
Because the church culture, you can just say, hey, he goes to the same church as me, so he's not going to screw me.
And I see that with 60-year-old, all the 6-year-olds coming in retirement planning. It is devastating to see the situations they're in. And thankfully, I will say this, that older generation, the whatever that is, 60 and older, the one thing that they have that I don't think we have in our generations is they did know how to save. Yeah. They didn't know how to invest, but they knew how to save. They knew how to save more money than they spent. So for them, even though they're not in the best situations they could have been, they're still going to be able to be okay. My worry about our generation is, yeah, we probably made more money than them. We can go do things, but we haven't created that mentality of saving the same way, which doesn't make you wealthy, but it does make sure that you can survive.
How do you, I mean, the thing is you're young, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you come after, like, use me for an example. Mm-hmm. 32 years old, make a lot of money, but also I'm a wild man. Most people at our age that are making the kind of money, we're wild men. So how do you engage the interest of a wild man and make it sexy enough that you're not putting and making 8% on a bond, but also not moonshot risky enough that it screws it?
It's realizing that the more risk you take on one end, let's say venture capital, you're putting 50 grand on this company that your buddy just started and you believe in him and you believe he's a good jockey. Like the risk of that's probably 10 times the risk of the S&P 500, right? So if I'm going to take that risk, the reward's there if it hits. I need to offset that risk with something on the other side. Yeah. So it's not saying that you can't take large risk, is making sure you have the equivalent balance on the other side. I think people, especially we'll call it the wild men, that want to invest, they want to do these things, they want to have liquid money, they just need to be comfortable with cash. Yeah. Like I know that's a crazy thing and that's not, you'd hear from your advisor to be like sitting in money markets. Yeah. But the reality is there's no long-term investment. If you're ready to move that money in and out, then be okay with the cash being that diversification. Yeah. Instead of putting it in a bond where you're locking it up and you can't get it and it's liquid, just put it in cash. Yeah. And just make sure it's moving in these certain ways. And so I think even with my clients, like I'll tell them like cash is not I know every investor says cash is terrible because they want you to invest their money. Yeah. But if you're taking massive risk, it's okay to have cash. It's okay to have that ready to go because what happens, obviously, if you get too far, then everything's all in. Yeah. And then something bad happens with one of them. You have to double down. Now you're selling these assets to cover these losses. And now the downturn is awful. Yeah. Where the cash could have easily solved that problem. So I think it's reserves. Apple is $1 trillion company sitting on $250 billion in cash. Yeah. They take loans and don't spend their own cash. Right. Because they understand that powder, they can go buy up a company, they can go do those different types of things, and they're taking big risk. So I think it's truly, it's cliche, it's having a financial plan. If you're going to go be wild here, let's make sure wife, kids, these things over here are taken care of. The younger you are, the less you need of that. But as you get in your 30s and 40s, it's just starting to chunk away more of that money.
Yeah, most of the people who live in my neighborhood, they're doctors who've been making 300 G's, 400 G's, but they've been doing it for 20 years. And you're just like, oh, okay. If they just start chunking it away. I don't know. Do you deal with a lot of people who are just like, wow, this money's going to flow forever? Sometimes I feel like a stupid athlete. Well, yes. I'm going to blow it. How do you get them to – because the problem is when you get people who are very successful, then they start thinking that they're smarter than people and start – how do you get them to – can you not get them to break out of it? They got to come to you in a humble moment, or
it's
what?
Hard. Yeah, they truly. You live. It's experience. They learn. So Stanford did a study that pretty much gives you the reason why people don't prepare for the future, is they pretty much polled them and said they made them think about themselves at 60. And what they found, and they like literally put something on their brain and studied their brain waves and all the different things, is the study found that they could not connect with themselves. And because they couldn't connect with their future selves, they don't prepare for their future selves. Then, this was still a few years ago before AI was really good, they made future models of you when you're 60.
Yeah. They
had you in like a robot form through some VR, had you meet yourself at 60. Then it was a test study. They came back, interviewed those same people, and they had a very different opinion on their future because they truly saw themselves in the future.
You got to make it like A Christmas Story or whatever it is.
It's pretty much what it was. That until that happened, they would never be able to do. So I think, like you said, the answer is the data's always been there to tell them what to do. There's great people out, Warren Buffett, Ray Dalio, have told people for years, hey, there's tried and true ways to do it. But until you connect with that older self, or you lose a close friend, or you lose something like that, you're not going to do that. And that being said, entrepreneurship, we're a bunch of crazy people.
Yep.
Like that's an anti-human characteristic as an entrepreneur. Humans are we want to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Our brain is set not to help us grow, it's to actually protect us.
Yeah.
Those that are entrepreneurs are like, screw that. I don't need to work. Your tolerance of risk is high. And so it's harder to work with actually entrepreneurs from a financial planning standpoint, because I'm never going to corral them. The reality is, a lot of the times with these entrepreneurs, I actually won't manage their money. I'll just come in and say, hey, you need this risk protection, get life insurance, get business protection, get these on like terrible things that can happen, and dude, just go for it. Because I can at least protect end of world things in your life from
black swan events.
Yeah, black swan events from happening. But it is going to be hard. Now, the older they get, they naturally are going to come to it. But that's why I've stayed away working with athletes, kind of, because it's now there's some athletes that come from farm towns that'd be the best athlete's money to manage, right? He doesn't care about a thing. He probably wants it in CDs and very conservative. But most people are not going to do that. They want to spend, and obviously with some athletes, they don't have an entrepreneurship skill. And so that's awful because they're going to run out of money.
So you do work with athletes. I've worked with some athletes. I'll tell you, fighters are the craziest people on planet Earth. I mean, they're most impulsive and just insane people. When you've been working with athletes and you've worked with entrepreneurs, what are some of the similarities and what are their differences?
Yeah, I think the similarities is they bet on themselves, right? So like they're betting on themselves. They're delusional. Yeah. They're completely delusional in what is life. They look short-term, not long-term. But I do think that, I don't know, I still like really value and appreciate those types of people because they are going all in. Like fighters are putting their lives on the line. Yeah. Like literally and not even like, one is like getting killed, but the second is the damage that your body has. Like that's worse than dying in some ways. It's like
damage, and then also the humiliation of getting knocked out in front of millions.
Right. And so we've got close friends that knock somebody out and then 6 months later got knocked out in front of everybody. Right. Like it's a wild thing. But I think entrepreneurs have that too, though. It's maybe not as public. Sometimes social media has made it public. But having all these losses, right? Yeah. There's a ton of losses that come. So I think there's a similarity there of like entrepreneurs. Yeah, you're gonna every good fighter. Not all of them are undefeated, but they have 3 or 4 losses. Any great entrepreneur is going to have those losses, but they're going to have more wins than losses. At the end of the day, it's still just playing the odds. It's just being the casino. As long as you're winning more than you're losing, you're coming out ahead.
Yeah,
it's tough though. It's not once again, we're dealing with crazy people that you can't talk. They're not accountants. Accountants do things by a book in a rule system. Entrepreneurs break rules.
Let me ask this question then, which will lead to my bigger question on that point. How many years have you been doing wealth management?
7 or 8 now.
7 or 8.
Yeah.
So now, because when I grew up watching, I talk fighting a lot because I do a lot with the UFC and things. And when I grew up watching it, these my heroes. These guys, you don't realize till later they're like 5'5", and it's like
very different.
But then once you get close to these guys, I've interviewed a bunch of them. Then I have a hard time watching them fight because I'm like, oh, I love that guy. I don't want to see it. It makes it humanized.
Yes.
When you're dealing now with all these people with money, I'm sure you've watched people just go from the highest high to the lowest low. How is it for you as a financial advisor and as somebody who's involved to watch them do that? And how do you try and pull? What can you do?
No, I one that's somewhat similar. It was a former police captain in Miami. This was I was still in Florida, so I was working for a firm that obviously started my own. But he came in and they had millions of dollars, but they were spending hundreds of thousands a year. And I tried, and his wife's there, and he finds out he has cancer, and he couldn't get life insurance because he was too old.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to literally help him realize if you keep spending the way you spend, you're going to run out of money. And the problem with that is, and so I actually didn't take him on as a client because I tried. I tried to get him to realize, but he would not adjust what they were spending. What ultimately happened, because I know he only had 3 years to live, and I was doing the math, he didn't have his pension cover her. So his pension didn't cover her. She was going to go from about $8,000 to $9,000 of income coming through pension, Social Security to $2,000 when he died.
Jeez.
If she would spend even at a 70% rate that they were spending, she'd be out of money in 7 years. She was 10 years younger. She was 60 and he was 70. And I tried to help him see it. Didn't help. And finally, he had millions of dollars. I would have made good money managing his portfolio, but I knew at the end of the 8 years, our firm would have been the bad guy.
Yeah.
It would have been our fault.
Yeah.
We didn't do it. So some people you can't, but others, I do think analytics, so labs, so to answer your question is, when you go, and I think it's becoming more popular, I think our generation is realizing like maybe the hospitals aren't, or these institutions aren't in our best interest, that we probably should go to other places and actually get our testosterone checked and get our blood work checked because our doctors are not going to do that. And the same thing as this is most people maybe not know, but they kind of know what a good blood pressure is. They know what a good A01C is if you've been taught it. But on the financial world, no one's actually sat down and said, hey, this is how you measure if you're performing well. If you're investing in stocks, how do you measure if you're doing well? Everyone just knows rate of return. They don't know risk versus reward.
Right.
And so what I've realized is those that have been harder to work with, once I can get them to look at their financial labs, what their beta and alpha is of their investment portfolio, what their tax liabilities are, and help them, not me telling them what to do, but helping them see where they're at, it does start to kick them into gear to realize like, okay, I do have to make changes.
Yeah.
Not because Shea told me, but because these reports, I'm starting to see it. Just like if your cholesterol is 500 right now, you'd be this close from a freaking stroke. Yeah. You'd realize like, oh crap, I got to make changes. Yeah. I have to make changes today. But if no one ever does that blood work, you're just going to die one day. So
that's on the client side of the fund and the company. Which would you say that's primarily your responsibility, is bringing clients in?
Yeah, so I have a partner. My partner does a lot, Gary. He does a lot of the back end, builds the models, the financial, the investment side of it. And mine is more of sitting down, probably the counseling side of sitting with the client and saying, hey, where are you at? What are your goals? What do you want? And between us two, we should have different licenses. Like we're able to build a complete holistic plan for them. But it's transition now. We've kind of put not a limit, a minimum on the clients we're working with. We don't want to be a wide company with a bunch of advisors. Yeah. We want to work with high net worth individuals and have a small amount of clients, more of a multifamily office type of feel, because that's kind of what we've been the last years, transitioning that way, which allows me to take on more executives, allows me to take on more people that need more time. They can't just meet with me once a quarter. They're going to need, if you got a bunch of money, you got a lot of moving parts. You need to be checking in once a month. You need to be checking in more often than once a year, where a lot of these investment firms check in their clients once a year.
Yeah.
Like that can't happen in an entrepreneur's life or an exec. There's just too much stuff goes on in a 12-month calendar. Look how much your life has changed 12 months. Like 3 months from now, life's going to be different. And so, but as a firm, we have to have the ability to be able to have the time for those clients. And so that's really what I've been working on the last year from that side of it. And then we have our consulting side, which is more of not necessarily trying to manage the client's money, but really helping them from more of it's an advisory role, where it's not saying, hey, we're management, but we're just giving you guidance on what to do. Meaning you're managing your own fidelity, but we're going to help you structure it so you have a little bit of barriers within itself. And that's a different relationship with the client that is probably going to be more common in the next 10 years than it is right now.
So you provide, and I've watched you provide it, but you provide a white glove counseling service, and I want to talk about that in a second. But on the internal side, when you guys are picking deals or deciding where money's going, who is it that calls bullshit on a deal, and how do they determine it? How do you take more risk while being more safe?
There you go. So you offset it. So beta, and this is a little bit more detailed, but beta and alpha, and I mentioned it before, is a measurement of risk. So the S&P 500, if you ever heard the term benchmarks, there's benchmarks in health, right? There's a benchmark. The S&P, we have measurements since 1957 of what the S&P's volatility. The days it goes up, the days it goes down. The S&P is considered a 1 beta, meaning if you are more aggressive, let's say you want to be at a 1.5 beta, that means you're taking 50% more risk than the market. So if you're taking 50% more risk, then you better be getting 50% more reward.
Right.
So that's alpha. That's measuring risk to reward. And so when we're looking at building client portfolios, we have to navigate the risk is fine, but we need to know if they're needing to pull money out. So as an executive that you're not needing to spend money, you can afford to take higher risk because you don't need to sell that stock in the short term to get income, right? Yeah. So with clients that come in as we're meeting with them, and that's the first thing in question, do you need to live off any of this money? If the answer is yes, then we need to reduce the risk and create a short-term, low-risk investment plan. Then the rest of it can go higher risk. If they don't need income, then we can take higher risk across the board. And so really when we say yes or no on things, when we're looking at money managers, when we're looking at different things, what I'm looking at is what's their performance versus the benchmark. Because if I'm going to tell a client to pay us a fee, right, to manage their money and to choose these things, then if I'm charging a 1% fee, then these models better be getting at least a 1% alpha. Better be outperforming by 1. If not, the client should just be in the S&P 500. Right? So a lot of that is based on looking at it. When we, on our kind of network, we have like 25,000 investment funds that we have access to as independent. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all that. And my partner does all this. But we did an analysis, only 4%, this is like end of 2022 or 2023, only 4% of all of those funds had a positive alpha.
Jeez. So
it tells you that this is a system. This is a system. This isn't just a bad egg, a bad advisor. This is a system being created because no one knows how to measure it. And so you got 30%. I actually had a seminar last night, and I polled my little clients that were in it, and I said, hey, if you got a 10% in the last 12 months, is that a good year? Every single person said yes. But then I said, what if the stock market did 35%? Is 10% still good?
Terrible.
And they all said no. So I said, then why did you say 10 the first time? Because that's what we're programmed. We're programmed to think 10 is good. But if the market's doing 40, 10's not good. That means we're losing to inflation, right? So that's really our investment philosophy is staying close to the benchmark. Warren Buffett has preached it for 25 years. If you don't know what you're doing, you better stay close to the benchmark. And so if somebody brings a deal that's taking higher risk, like venture capital, we call it slivers in their portfolio, right? Then if they want to be at a beta of 1 total, but they want to take this high risk, then I have to reduce their risk on the other side because I'm trying to find where they want to be. So, but if you want to be at a 2 beta, then we can take higher risk, right? So a lot of that is where we sit with the client and see their risk tolerance. But yeah, most of our, hey, it's a good deal or bad deal is based on performance. The hard part in private equity venture, it's all about the jockey more than the numbers. And so it's harder to measure success. That's why we're seeing a lot of struggles in Utah right now. We had a lot of people raise money during the easiest time to probably raise money in American history, and then they had to deploy the capital. At the time, interest rates went up and deals went sideways and cost of all these things went up and supply chains and all these different things. And it was already hard enough to know if that deal was going to be good, let alone the economic elements that come into place. And so that's why I get worrisome on venture. We've really stayed away from our clients, specifically in venture and private equity, unless they brought it to us. If they brought it to us, then we will look at it.
It's tough, though. Like for me, the most exciting thing for me to do is to have pieces of companies because
100%.
But Honestly, I think the main problem with that, because I've invested in a couple companies, and they've for the vast majority just gone tits up, and it's because I subscribe my own what it took for me to build performance windows.
Yes.
I just say, oh, they'll definitely do that same thing, and then they don't, and it's just bamboozling. Like, what are you talking about? You got
Because
to
you're
do it.
applying your work ethic. You're saying, obviously, they know things that you don't know because they're in this industry. But
niche
you're
industry.
applying you're like, if I knew what they knew and I had this company, it would be successful if they had but that's not people.
They don't do it.
That's
crazy.
not people. And that is where, and especially when money is easy and accessible, then founders look like, oh, yeah, we're going to bet on this company.
Yeah.
But you look at one of my good friends, Taylor Brown. He just all over LinkedIn the last week because his company's founder of Redo.
Yeah.
Pelion's, their baby in one of their funds, and just had Sterling Snow be their CEO, which helped build Divvy. And Taylor Brown's a jockey.
Yeah.
And I've missed out on both of the last two, and I should know better than that.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I'm going to bet on that man because of not necessarily the company, the money, but it's the jockey. So I think the higher risk you're taking, it's not necessarily the money and the volatility. It is who is running the thing.
Yeah.
Now, as you get down to the S&P 500, why that's a little bit easier to manage because these are the top 500 CEOs in the world.
Yeah.
Right? They've already been vetted. Now, it doesn't mean they're not some bad ones that come into place, but they're running one of the top 500 companies in the world.
Yeah.
They've been pretty vetted. Doesn't mean that they won't have bad ones, but that's why Warren Buffett has said, if you don't know what you're doing, just bet on pretty much the top 500 CEOs. That's pretty much what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm betting on those rather than betting on the young founder that just has this idea.
Yeah.
Like the risk to reward has to equal.
Well, it's funny
across the
because
board.
we know what it is to build a company, and it's ass and it sucks all the time. And you kind of just prescribe that they will see the light at the end of the tunnel too and want to do it. But in reality, I had to do it without money.
Yes.
A lot of the people that did it without money. So when they get the money, when you give money, then maybe people take a little breather and don't do it. It's like they had this thing back in England in 1900 some early year where they had a strike because the mailmen were bringing the welfare checks too early in the morning. And they were striking for them to bring them so that they could sleep in.
Yes.
And I think when people get money, they didn't have to bootstrap it, and I'm sure there's a lot of cases where they're okay. But once you get that check clears, now it's red panty night, and everybody, we got all these drink machines, and we got all these things in the building when you don't need them.
Yep. No, I think that is the hardest thing in that level of risk is we have no idea what it's going to be. It's the athlete, right? Some athlete may get the money and do well with the money. They all worked hard to get the skills and get to where they are. That money you're gonna know pretty quickly. And like you said, the founder bootstraps it. He's doing great. Everything's there. He gets that first Series A, or he gets the seed round, and now all of a sudden he not cashed out, but kind of cashed out.
He breathes and just stops doing what.
There you go.
Stops dancing with the one who took him.
And now all of a sudden you bet on the guy coming up, not the guy once he got the money and where it is. And so you really have to see just that's why I will say this. I am zero motivated by money. I actually wish when I was in door-to-door sales that I would have been motivated by money more because that was where I envied. It was like I would have been better if I would have been more motivated. But I also think in the long term, it's been a benefit because almost everything good in the last couple years, connections, relationships, has become because I didn't care about the money and the transaction of it. And that is not a Utah thing the same way. Everything, we've been in these meetings. I know you've given a lot to people as well, but everything is just looked at as a transaction rather than it should be a relationship of, at this point in your time, I can help you out. But I almost shouldn't even have to ask if I need it in the future. It should be this reciprocal relationship.
You got me. Let me take care of you.
Let me take care of what do you need? I'm good now. What do you need? And that's how relationships should be built. But I think because we're so good at sales here, that it's always trying to find the better deal. And that sometimes takes people out of it. And you start to look at people differently as transactions. And so I think, man, Utah it literally is an anomaly. It's the most fascinating place in the world, and we're going to have $1 billion exits, so we're going to have these things. But I do believe with a lot of California, it's bad with California coming, but I do believe there's more operators coming now. And so these founders are going to be able to have that entrepreneurship spirit, be able to take it to a point, and then there's actually going to be operators able to step in and take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Where I think even though we've had good exit, there's been a lot of companies that probably could have made it, but that entrepreneur was a salesman, not an operator,
Yeah.
and it never got past that next standpoint. But I think now, I'm very bullish on Utah the next 10, 15 years, but I'm bullish if there's good operators.
And I like to hear people who are smarter than me say those things. You know, sometimes I'll go to these meetings. Yeah, especially it was a Coins and Cars way back, and I think it was, what's Bridger's dad's name?
John.
I think it was John or it was Dan talking, and they were just like, yeah, so this is really bad coming here, and I'm just like, well. Okay, great. You know, I only like to hear good news. It's like in Jeremiah, all the prophets only tell good news.
Yeah, just tell me good news.
Just tell me the good stuff because I can't do anything about the bad. When you are, I'll switch gears here because we're getting close to the end. But you're a husband and a father.
Yep.
You grew up without that very stable upbringing. How do you, it's just like learning financial literacy. How do you learn even the bad habits to not do because your parents weren't even. For me, I could watch my dad was around, so I could watch him do things that I don't like, so I'm not going to do those things. But having grown up the way you do, how do you build those habits?
Yeah, I think it was, there's some habits. So it's interesting. I believe as a single person, the situation I was in was incredible from, obviously in the moment, hated it. You know, no one wants to be raised by grandparents necessarily. I always felt like a little bit of an outcast, always felt like I didn't have the same situation. But then at about 21, 22, I was like, oh, I have an edge. Yeah. Like I actually can wipe the floor. Now once we're out of this high school dynamic, like this has actually been a good thing. But then I started to see the consequences of my childhood probably more when I got married. Yeah. Because there was things that I didn't learn when it comes to a marriage or it comes to kids that were kind of the negatives. And I think those are the things I'm working on now. It's like I am so independent. And my wife's like, what, you're just going to go? Like, I'm just so, because that's what gave me an edge is that I could always, because I had nothing holding me, I could take the risk. I could go do the thing. I could just jump on a plane and go do that and take those risks. And so having to navigate that has been hard. But I also think the biggest thing is just being self-aware. Yeah. Like I think that is something that I am good at is in my employees and the people I've worked with. Like I'm very much people, like my staff makes fun of me because they know what I'm not good at. Yeah. And I am okay with that. Like, but I also, they know what I am good at. And as long as that's overcompensating, then we should be good. But like with my wife is she knows where I struggle and I'm very open with her on it. And she knows it. And so a lot of it's open communication. But to answer it, I don't know how. I'm working on building those skills. I think that's the hardest thing. Like being a father, though, like I actually got that. Yeah. I know how to do that.
Yeah, it's easy because you just think, I want to be around that kid. Do you ever think to yourself, though, like I'm emotionally stunted. Mm-hmm. My father, when I was growing up, if I was crying, he wouldn't say a word until I stopped crying, right? And do you ever think, though, like, well, I don't want to tinker with those things too much because it's led to a lot of my success, so I don't want to – like I went to a consultation. Everybody was telling me I needed to go to therapy. And so I went to a consultation, and, I just kind of talked to him, and his office was too small. I was like, I'm not coming back. But the idea is, like, some of all this combination has allowed me to be successful, and I don't want to tinker with it too much. Do you have that thought ever? Or
it's how do you artificially create – that without
taking away the savagery,
without like the trauma, like the PTSD traumas of things. And I don't think many people have been able to do that, right? Because if you have multiple kids, each kid's going to have a different personality. So there's not like this template that you can have. But I do think that I loved what Shaq said one day, and I think he took his kids to Disneyland or Disney World once, and they had like the Club 33, and they went and did all the things. And then his son went again. And he's like, hey, Dad, can I get the Club 33? And he's like, no. Yeah. You're going to stand in line with your kids. Yeah. Like, and so it's, I don't like the idea of like, I think somebody said something like they make their kids drive in coach while they're in first class.
Yeah. I think I heard that too,
I yes, I get it. But Shaq's was more of like, no, when he's with me, I want him to see what success gets you in life. So I want you to have vision. But I want you to also know this isn't yours.
Yeah.
This is mine. This is what I've built.
And that's actually what I've always attributed to a lot of my success. My father made a lot of money when I was growing up, a couple $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I got like an ex-wife, I got used to a certain lifestyle.
Yep.
But then once I got married, that money was
Yep.
cut off. And so if I wanted to be able to have that lifestyle again, I had to go out there and do it and do it and do it.
So I think that's where I think the hope in this one is I didn't really have the vision until I met Larry. And Larry is not like financially successful, but he's an incredible leader successful from that standpoint, and has done well at companies and things like that. But I think what the lives that we live is like we are going to have, our kids are going to see financial success, but having them know that, hey, you've got to find your way to do that. And I just think that our school system doesn't do a great job of that. So I think with having the money and the resources is giving your kids those opportunities as young as possible to say, what do you want to do? Giving them the opportunities, but at some point saying, hey, what's your effort to be able to do it? One thing like Kihei Akina, top golfer, it's fascinating, the Akina. So his older brother's starting a point guard at NYU basketball. He's got a sister at Harvard playing rugby. His other brother was a dual athlete in high school, came back from a mission and walked on to BYU, was one of their top 2 golfers, and then Kihei, this young golf prodigy. So I asked Alan, I'm like, dude, how did you do this? All your kids are at top schools playing sports. How do you do it? And he said, with Kihei was a good golfer, but Alan didn't just give Kihei the ability to golf whenever he wants. He waited for Kihei to say, Dad, this is what I want.
Yeah.
Dad, this is what I want. Then he gave. Where a lot of parents, and I see this, a lot of parents are like, hey, do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And they're actually, by the time the kid's a freshman, he's like, dude, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't want any of this.
Force him to do it.
And so I think there is that balance of letting your kid come and decide that. But the hard part is you're going to have one of your kids, you're going to do it perfectly, and that other kid's going to be completely opposite.
It's just so tough, too, because I've got 3 kids. You're still
I got one. But
yeah, the tough part is, like, I've always really believed it's a lot of nurture versus nature.
Yes.
And I think that's a lot, right? Like, sometimes I always think like, oh, if that was my kid, I would have hit him a lot more, and he wouldn't be doing that crazy,
Yep.
Being hyperbolic. But the point is that even still, my youngest daughter is just the sassiest, kind of meanest girl, and I'm doing the same stuff. So there is some nature to it. That's always been the tough part, is like when you're really good at something, right? Like I'm good at what I do, you're good at what you do. When you're really good at something, it's scary to be bad at something that will so violently affect somebody else's life,
Well, I think to finish, the one thing that I believe that we in society build average people, meaning we don't really tell you to focus. We tell you to focus on your talents, but we also spend so much time trying to fix your weaknesses. Like the one things I will do with my kids is we will double down on their strengths.
Yeah.
Like in life, you're going to need people. So you already know you can just get people in your life that are going to fulfill those weaknesses that you have. Obviously, there's like personal weaknesses that can come up later, but more private weaknesses. But in a sense, like I'm not good at accounting. I'm not good at some of these things. But guess what? I'm going to need more people to help me, and I'm going to find the guy that's really good at that.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to lose my skill and not double down on my skill. And the other part in parenting is somebody told me this. He said, your first 10 years of your kid is teach them discipline. But about 10 and older, if you didn't instill that discipline, you can try.
Yeah.
From 10 to 18, probably not going to happen super well. At 10 to 18 is that you need to be a mentor. You need to show them the way through your own personal stuff. I think that, and show them that, hey, you need to go out there and you need to become yourself. And then he said, in your 20s and on, you need to be a friend. Like that's your job as a parent at that point, is to be their friend. Obviously be their guide and their thing, but to be a friend. But if you don't have discipline in the first 10 years, then you're not going to have those stages that come. And I think that's something that I think about a lot too. But I don't know. I think we're all winging it. And I also think that like the world is changing so fast that some of these styles, honestly, although have been effective for maybe even generations of time, are going to have to change.
Yeah.
Like our kids get access to things, even if we try to not,
Insanely
they're going
quick.
to.
Yeah.
So I think we got to be more vulnerable with our kids too, in a lot of ways.
I love it, dude. Well, I'll tell you, I've known you for a while now, Shea. I'm glad to have you in here. Tell people where they can find you, and more importantly, where they can kind of get involved with what you're doing.
Yeah, so I think the easiest way is like probably Instagram at Shea Swens. That is probably, you can hit me a DM. www.stonebriar Financial is our financial services. You can contact if you need any help there. But yeah, just reach out, connect, and obviously between me and you, we're doing tons of events, we're doing tons of things. That would be my biggest things for people that are on the sidelines saying, "Oh, I want to do this." Is like you just got to show up.
Yeah.
Like even if you're not invited, sometimes just show up and get involved. And I think that's the biggest way I've got the edge in my life. And so, but just for anybody, just hit up and obviously I think both of us are caretakers, want to help people. Especially those that want to be helped. So
yeah, and I'll give my personal endorsement for I've had you come out and speak to my company and a bunch of young kids making a lot of money, but having you come out and speak to people, even teams and things, has been a big boon.
And it's fun. I would do that. I do that for free. It's fun because I do believe your gifts. Although yes, there's a financial element that sometimes comes, but it's a gift that I love. I mean, we do 3 to 4 seminars a week. Like I'm speaking I spoke yesterday and we'll speak tomorrow, right? But I actually enjoy it. That's what keeps me going, is doing those events. So would love it, man.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Shea Swenson, follow him.